Welcome to The Keep, the Employee Experience Podcast. Your host, Greg Weiss, brings together experts from around the world sharing their insights on creating amazing employee experiences. Having the wrong attitude about their people can cost businesses a fortune. Having the right attitude will build success. Over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Angela. In my very first episode of the Keep podcast, I invited John Studdert, successful businessman and angel investor, to be my inaugural guest. And what you'll hear from John is a practical, no-nonsense philosophy to business. We learned that communication is absolutely critical, and that by looking after the employee experience, then the customer experience is a great one and profitability follows. I'm here with John Studdert. I've known John for decades, and I can say he's a very accomplished and fine human being. So on your accomplishments, John, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Greg, thanks so much for having me on the show. From an accomplishment perspective, I think the things you probably want to talk about today are the fact that I've done my own startup and sold it to a multinational. I've run a multinational, and now I invest in early stage companies and help commercialize them.
When you're investing in businesses, there are teams that are going to be engineered together. Tell me about the rules as they start to cascade down into not just the owners, but also the employees.
Yeah, well, I think when people are joining an organisation, they often have a set expectation based on the job ads, the interviews, maybe the values that are promoted in an organisation. They have an expectation that often isn't met when they actually join. They find that things are quite different. And when their expectations subsequently aren't met, they become upset, disenfranchised, disengaged, look at maybe leaving, finding another opportunity. And similarly for owners, for managers, not setting the expectations up front of their employees, is a disadvantage to them because, they'll find that they've got unhappy employees and they're often not even sure why. So I often found that, in different environments, that I would say, this is a hard-working environment. We're going to pay you better than you would normally get in most other roles. Your hours are often, you're going to be expected to work longer hours, and that's the nature of the beast. That's the nature of where we are right at the moment as a startup or as a growing business or as an agency that has lots of clients with a demand at 5 o'clock that's got to be sorted out the next morning. And if you don't want to buy into that, then that's fine. We're just not the right place for you. But the upside of it is that there are these options you're going to get, or there are these international career opportunities, or you're going to work alongside the best people in the industry in a culture that's very achievement oriented. So just making sure that people are very clear in terms of what you're offering and what they're going to get, and that it's a true reflection of the environment. It's not something that you feel you should be saying to attract good people, and because those good people, if it's the wrong expectation, will leave.
John, I want to use the analogy of golf, which you're passionate about, and business and rules, and the employee experience. Let's talk about that.
In golf, there are lots of rules and there's lots of etiquette, and you'll pick up a lot of it through actually playing the game and playing the game with people who already understand the etiquette and understand the rules. And I'm still out there asking, what should we do here? And because there are all sorts of complicated things that can happen in 18 holes. And similarly in business, a lot of things happen and you're not necessarily going to be clear what the rules are. But as much as is possible before someone joins an organisation on a weekly, on a regular basis, managers need to be saying, this is how we do it around here. And I think often the rules or the expectations aren't communicated. And one of the reasons they're not communicated is because I think a lot of people leading and managing businesses shouldn't be in those roles. They've often been promoted because they're technically competent, but their people and managerial skills have often fallen behind the sort of levels they've reached. And they're afraid of having tough conversations.
John, golf is a place where there are rules, and there you go to the book, and there are some clear guidelines. But in business, there aren't clear guidelines. Take us through an example where there wasn't a clear guideline, and you had to come up with some rules that helped to improve the employee experience.
I'll share one. There's a little bit of a twist on that because it was an important one for me, and that was when my business partner and I were coming up to sell our business. And we had an agreement between us, and it was to do with what percentages I owned and what percentages they owned, and we were coming up to an acquisition. And we looked at each other. We went for a walk around a park, and we said, well, what do you think's fair? We both had the same number in our minds. It was a sort of meeting of the middle, and I think it was a really good sign of the sort of faith and trust and what sense of fairness was. And that's a happy story. But there are other examples where you don't have a happy story, where someone's expectations and yours are a mile apart. And I've just been involved in a commercial disagreement where the rules weren't clear and both parties thought the deal was something very different, and it was very expensive going through mediation to unwind something and for someone else to adjudicate what was fair in the middle.
So fairness is an important value to you. And what about fairness in terms of creating the employee experience?
Yeah, I've always wanted to create a work environment that people want to come to and enjoy, and I often thought, how would they describe my workplace? The business I started and sold, I'm really excited that a lot of the people from that business still catch up 10, 15 years afterwards for coffees and dinners. And I remember one of the first workplaces I was in was Pepper's Hotel Group. And Pepper's there was a particular property called Pepper's on Sea. We had a wonderful general manager there, Walter Emos. And 20 years after that hotel had opened, there was a get-together. And there were about over 200 people that turned up for this, all to see Walter, because Walter was just such an amazing human being and such an amazing leader, to create a work environment for me that people want to join, they want to put the extra effort in, they want to recommend their friends come and work.
And that's an important thing. It's a really important thing about recommendation. There's a lot of people talk, clearly, and people will believe far less in what they read nowadays than what they hear. So that's an important thing in terms of how you can create that experience, how you can create the referral aspect of a business. Now, you've been in the communications business for quite some time. What tips would you suggest to employers about creating a referral type environment where people have had a really good experience to refer?
Well, I think there's a philosophy that tends to resonate well with most employees, and that is that if the leadership considers that the most important thing they need to do is to look after their employees, because the employees will look after the customers, the guests, the clients, whoever they are, and then the guests, the customers, clients will look after the shareholders. I think that's the right cascading of importance.
So the first thing is employees, then customers, and everything else will follow.
That tends to be, in my experience, the right order, because you imagine running it the other way around, where if we focus on making the dollars first, and then we do that through getting the money out of the customers, and then working our employees hard to try to get there, and we put them last. And that tends to be, in a lot of businesses, the sort of order of priority. I don't find that's a very good formula for success. I'd rather say look after your own people first and the rest follows. And
you and Richard Branson are in very good company. He certainly said along those particular lines, and look at his businesses and how much shareholder value he's created. After the break, John shares more of his business philosophy and how important the employee experience is for a sustainable and successful business.
Eagle Ways Radio. Eagle Ways Radio, the voice of small business.
People come and go in organisations all the time, and while that's normal, high employee turnover can be expensive. Greg Weiss and Career Support 365 have structured onboarding and offboarding services. They create the foundation for long-term success, protecting the employer and brand while helping people perform at their best and fit in quickly. Start strong, finish strong. To find out more, go to careersupport365.com.
So, John, I'm curious, in terms of today, do we have a different environment where, again, you've been in the communications industry for quite some time, do we have to communicate to employees differently to what we did in the past?
Well, it's interesting that you use the word communication, because I think people often think that means it's a verbal or a written, something formal. But actually, we communicate so much more through other aspects in an organisation, from symbolism, from subtleties, from where offices are located, what a Christmas party looks like, what bonuses are based on. All of those things communicate a lot more than a lot of the verbal aspects do. But I would say that there are a couple of key things to focus on. One is the relationship between someone and their direct reports.
What do you mean there?
Well, that's, in an organisation, say, of 100, they're often about 10, generally about 10% of an organisation is in some sort of managerial leader role. In an organisation of 1,000, there's about 100. And that level there of that 10% of organisation, making sure that they really understand what the business is about, where it's headed, and they can have those conversations. I'm a big believer in conversations as opposed to, emails or, one way. That an ability for a manager to sit down regularly with individuals and talk about their roles, are they playing to their strengths and passions, what are they finding is helping them deliver their job well versus what's standing in the way. I think that style of communication and making sure that you're linking an individual's performance and work right through to what an organisation's trying to achieve is absolutely critical.
And there aren't that many leaders that are really well equipped to have those types of conversations. So again, just helping to infuse that. Back in your past, how did you help to inculcate those strengths, those skills?
Well, firstly, I think it is about having people in the right roles. And in any form of leadership role, I think you need to have some base level of communication skills. People are often promoted into the wrong roles because of a technical competence. Mm-hmm. I think those technical competence are often best left in, roles that play particularly to that strength. And other people have, broader leadership, managerial, communication skills that often make better leaders. I've promoted people into leadership roles and found out that it was an error. I'd much rather have people play to their technical skills if that's their ability, and others play to leadership skills if that's theirs, and felt quite comfortable promoting people on that basis.
So on that, just getting people into the wrong roles really has a huge impact on morale and on productivity. So how
can be devastating.
How quickly can you call it out that they're in the wrong place?
Almost immediately. You can see the impact on staff turnover, on morale, people telling you side channels, what have you done? That was a terrible mistake. And we've all done it. We've all done it. And often people's personalities changes too. They sort of get a promotion and they have this view of leadership that's quite different from their natural personality, and you've sort of given them a promotion and, I don't know, they become Dr. Jekyll, if that was the bad one. Was it Dr. Jekyll or Dr. Hyde? I don't know. Anyway, you know what I mean. They become quite a different personality type, and they go from being quite a collaborative worker to a totalitarian dictator, and it's just messy. And that's if you're able to take people on the journey to say, look, how are you feeling about this role? Are you enjoying it? You're not. They're often hating it as well, and you look for an opportunity to reassign them into maybe back into what they were doing before. But and I think we've all broken lots of people by putting them to the wrong roles.
Yes. So it takes a fair bit of maturity to call somebody out and then either see that there's something workable about being able to keep that person in the role that you aspired them to go into, or to say, hey, I've made a mistake. It takes a lot of organisational maturity. What can we tell our listeners about how to approach that?
Well, one of the tools that I've started using, which I think is a really good tool, it's a one-page, I call it a check-in template, and I'll have the different businesses I'm involved in, different owners, different people use it. And it's got 4 boxes, and it says, looking at the last month, what has energized you, and fill in 2 or 3 points, and what's depleted your energy. Looking ahead, what are you excited about and what concerns you? And then based on those things, what are the 1 or 2, 3 things you want to talk about today? And I found that as a little bit of self-reflection and sharing has become an enormously valuable tool. Because what it does is it sort of will tell you that someone that's working with you is really depleted by doing these few things. And maybe because it's not playing to their skills, maybe it's not something that they enjoy doing, we should be delegating to someone else, or they're really excited by doing this project and this one. Well, fantastic. How do we give them more? And you're inviting people to nominate what are the 2 or 3 things that they want to talk about. I'd recommend it. It's such a good tool. It's really, opened up some wonderful conversations.
Are you happy to share that with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So we'll have that as part of our show notes. One last question around that, and that is to do with strengths. So in the old days, we used to have employers say, oh, you've got weaknesses, we're going to have to improve those. Today, it's much more around playing to your strengths, to that last point you were making. What's your view on that?
I use a framework called HBDI.
Herman Brain Dominance
Dominance. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure the validity of it or otherwise.
It's pretty good.
It's something that I sort of came across 15 years ago or whenever it was. And the point that it emphasised to me was that you and I can be looking at each other thinking, oh, I don't like that about Greg, and you're saying, I don't like that about John, but I do like this about Greg and I do like this about John. And say, well, if we're working together and we're working on a project, how do we divide it up best so that you're doing what you do best and I'm doing what I do best? And in a broader organisation, I've found I want to have a mix of skill sets. And if you know HPDI, if you refer to it in the notes, there's an emotive sort of quadrant, there's an ideas, there's an organisational, there's an analytical. And in most business I'm involved in, you want a really good mix of the different skill sets.
Yeah, bringing in people who are just the same really creates a mono-track organisation, doesn't it?
Well, it can be a train wreck. If you have lots of people who have lots of ideas and lots of emotions, and they're all going to get excited and get on well, but nothing will get done, and it may be the wrong things. So most of the sort of leadership teams, the board meetings I'm involved in, I want the black hat. I want the analytical person. I want the organiser. I want the visionary. I want someone here who's building the relationships. It's a really important mix to have that sort of people playing to the different strengths and having a breadth and diversity of strength.
So I would actually say, just in summarising that main point, and that is the more that an employer can really understand the real individual, the better the experience that the employees have, the more authentic that you are with your leadership and with your team, and that the leadership is with the team, the better the organisation. Your comments?
Absolutely. And I think, I often become a little bit maybe more paternal nowadays. I think if my daughter or sons were working in this business, what experience would I want them to have? You put some human touches back into an environment, because I think a lot of businesses have become just a little too brutal in a way. And that's my own personal philosophy. I would like to have a business that I'd feel very proud for, my own children to work in. And I know I've got my eldest son is now working 2 of my startups in part-time work, and I feel really good about that.
Fantastic. I learned a lot from my session with John. All employers should harness the strengths of their people and not focus so much on their weaknesses. And think for a moment, would your organisation and the part you lead be the workplace you'd want your children to work in?
Thank you for listening to another podcast produced by Eagle Waves Radio. For more amazing podcasts, go to our website, eaglewavesradio.com.au. You can like us on Facebook and, of course, follow us on Twitter. Ever thought of having your own podcast? We can help.